As far as past councils go before the book's story begins, the Mad King's is the most detailed, and it's not even close. After I made a similar video on King Viserys, I had some requests to keep the ball rolling. So here we are with his great-great-grandson to the power of 5, Aerys Targaryen II, remembered as the Mad King. The select few members of the small council have a large amount of power and influence the king's decisions on pretty much everything, but these 7 advisors signed up for a job from hell. Aerys wasn't always so bad though. Things started off like most other successions. He came into power in 262 AC when he was only 18, after his father's short reign. First thing he did was appoint his best friend, Tywin Lannister, to be his hand of the king. Tywin, also being at a similarly young age, became the youngest to hold the position of hand. But he was a great choice. Tywin was built for ruling even before becoming lord of his own house. He fought in a war with Aerys as teenagers, and dealt with a rebellion against his lord father in the Westerlands that brought him fame. At age 19, Tywin, behind his father's back, brought the end of 2 powerful houses in his own kingdom. The old guy serving as hand of the king to Aerys' father was asked to step down in retirement to make room for Tywin, but some of his father's men stuck around on his small council. Grandmaster Pycelle, who serves as the most educated man in the room, representing the Citadel. They're supposed to be experts in every primitive subject you can think of, math, history, medicine, and personally looks after the health of the royals, as well as their education. It's the Citadel over in the Reach that elects their best mind to represent them in King's Landing, so there was very little Aerys could do about this position, as well as the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, who served Aerys' father Jaehaerys, has to keep that white cape on and stand guard until his death. That's a King's Guard vow after all. Not a lot is written about Sir Gerald, aside from his nickname, the White Bull, and Jaime Lannister's fond memories of him for the short period they spent as sworn brothers. There isn't a lot that Kingsguard members can offer a king in time of council, aside from the obvious security arrangements and battle preparations. Though being a noble Hightower, he definitely spent time reading and studying under his own family's maester back in the Reach. The last 4 positions share a more conventional naming theme. Master of Ships was Lord Viserys Velaryon. Anyone could have seen this one coming. The Velaryons historically run this position, being the Targaryens' closest ally and the best sailors and shipmakers around. Lord Viserys, possibly named after this poor little guy, is the head of the family during this era. Master of Coin went to Lord Carlton Chelstead. I always forget that this family even exists in the story. The Chelsteads are one of the minor houses in the Crownlands near the Targaryens. Lord Simon Staunton was named the Master of Laws, and just like Carlton, he hails from a forgettable minor house in the Crownlands. The 3 masters on the small council I just named were huge ass-kissers of Aerys. House Velaryon is much more wealthy and powerful compared to Chelstead and Staunton, but still just a former shell of what they were in the past, when the sea snake Lord Corlys Velaryon was around during the time of House the Dragon. The Mad King could be savagely cruel, as seen most plainly when he burned those he perceived to be his enemies, but he could also be extravagant, showering men who pleased him with honors, offices, and lands. The Lickspittle Lords, who surrounded Aerys II, had gained much and more from the king's madness and eagerly seized upon any opportunity to speak ill of Prince Rhaegar and inflame the father's suspicion of the son. That's a quote straight out of the lore book The World of Ice and Fire. Aerys didn't appoint a spy master as his master of whisperers until his paranoia went off the charts years into his reign. What prompted to finally fill that empty seat on the small council was his kidnapping at the age of 33. This is the event that made him fully lose his marbles. When once Aerys and Tywin were best pals, years at court together made them hate each other, mainly due to Aerys' jealousy of his hand who got all the praise. Tywin was killing it at his job, despite how often the king would make things difficult for him. The realm was a smooth running machine. Aerys would have these sporadic moments of attempting to be a great king, but would immediately get bored and leave all the ruling to Tywin. Other lords picked up on the tension at court, and one tried to take advantage of it in a dangerous manner. In the Crownlands, the kingdom where King's Landing is located was created by the Targaryens. This region didn't even have a name before them. Back then, the biggest players around was House Darkland, because of their convenient port making them all the gold. King's Landing almost immediately became the most populous city on the continent and took away all the Darkland's business. Lord Dennis Darkland, for some reason, thought he had enough leverage to request that the crown allow his family to make up their own laws so they can make more gold. Tywin, being a no BS kind of guy, said hell no. Dennis's rash reaction was to completely stop paying taxes to Targaryens until he meets with King Aerys himself, not Tywin. The mentally stunted king took the bait because Dennis didn't want to negotiate with the Hand. Aerys traveled lightly guarded, not assuming Dennis was as crazy as he was. Lord Dennis Darklyn took the king hostage and would only release him from his cell if his terms were agreed upon. If any soldier breached the Darklyn's castle walls, Aerys would be killed. After a few months of this standstill with Aerys prisoner, Tywin amassed a small army outside the walls and planned to destroy the Darklyns. That's how he usually deals with this kind of defiance from underlings. Tywin implied that a dead Aerys wasn't a big blow to the realm, since his heir Rhaegar was more stable and fit to rule. Sir Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard ended up single-handedly saving the day with a high-stakes mission in the middle of the night. He rescued Aerys and made it over the walls alive before Tywin ordered an attack on the city. Aerys came out of the 6-month imprisonment insane, a full-fledged Mad King. He was always erratic and flawed. Paranoia now controlled all of his actions. He had delusions of Rhaegar and Tywin coming after him. He believed he needed a spy master from across the sea so that this Master of Whispers wouldn't have any previous biases. Varys fit the bill. All seats of his small council were finally filled. And like Aerys hoped, Varys, aka the Spider, was deeply loyal to the Mad King for some reason. Lord Lucerys, Carlton, Simon, and Varys became a very dangerous combination at court for his paranoia, while Tywin and Gerald and Pycelle kind of just went on with their work while watching the descent into madness. After the Darklyns were brutally dealt with, wiping them off the globe, Aerys had extra men brought in to court as support. His cousin and old friend, Lord Steffon Baratheon, became an advisor with no official title being created for him, as well as another very curious selection, the leader of the Alchemists Guild within King's Landing, a man who went by Wisdom Rosart. Alchemy was almost a dead art in Westeros if it wasn't for the Mad King's obsession with fire funding them, specifically having people burned to death with wildfire, a highly flammable magic substance that only people with the title Wisdom in the Alchemist Guild know how to make. Like Steffon Baratheon, Wisdom Rosart became an official advisor on the small council without a real title like Master of Whispers that Varys and others before him got. Steffon died a year into his new job after an accident in the middle of a trip the king ordered him to take. Aerys then grew closer and closer to the Fire Wizard. Varys was fueling the Mad King's paranoia, and the Spider's information may have been right because the younger guys at court who weren't the king's yes men were beginning to gather around the heir, Rhaegar, who's as close to perfect as a prince can get in this world. The biggest concern of the small council in 281 AC was attorney at Harrenhal, when the Mad King was looking 40 years older than he actually was. Varys was whispering ideas into Aerys' head about Rhaegar or someone behind the scenes gathering all the most powerful lords to one location to back the prince, after being able to witness his skills as an attorney. The Three Stooges, Lucerys, Carlton, and Simon all agreed Rhaegar was planning a forced abdication. So Aerys, who never left the Red Keep since his kidnapping, also didn't let anyone touch him, that's why his hair and nails grew to disgusting lengths, finally faced his fears of the great outdoors and made his way to the tourney at Harrenhal, so nothing happened on his watch. Rhaegar would go on to win the tourney, beating out the best fighters in all the story, Arthur Dayne and Barristan Selmy, Aerys' worst nightmare. Around the time of the tourney, the Mad King also made one of the worst decisions of his life. He named 16-year-old Jaime Lannister to his Kingsguard. Jaime was good and worthy of a white cape, but this had malicious intentions behind the pick. Tywin scared the shit out of him, so he wanted Jaime by his side at all times as a hostage. But this also took away Tywin's preferred heir. The only other Lannister boy was little Tyrion, a dwarf Tywin tried to hide from the world. Tywin was angry enough to resign as Hand of the King and leave court to return to the Westerlands. The king replaced him as Hand with Lord Owen Merryweather, an aged and amiable lickspittle, famed for laughing loudest at every jape and witticism uttered by the king, no matter how feeble. Henceforth, his grace told Pycelle the realm would know for a certainty that the man who wore the crown also ruled the Seven Kingdoms. Aerys Targaryen and Tywin Lannister had met as boys, had fought and bled together in the War of the Nine Penny Kings, and had ruled the Seven Kingdoms together for close to 20 years. But in 281 AC, this long partnership, which proved to be so fruitful to the realm, came to a bitter end. 1 year after the tourney, Rhaegar decided to go on a trip with his closest buddies, but then disappeared along with Lyanna Stark. Many believed he kidnapped her. Lyanna's older brother, Brandon Stark, in all his rage, rode to King's Landing with some of his close buddies, screaming out for justice for his sister, walking around yelling, "Come out to die," to Rhaegar, who wasn't even there by the way, and landed Brandon and co. in the castle's cells, and eventually their deaths. You guys heard this story 1,000 times, but this kicks off Robert's rebellion. The king and his small council were confident at first, but didn't realize how little support they actually had in the Seven Kingdoms. The new Hand, Lord Owen Merryweather, couldn't contain the rebellious lords at the start of the war, so crazy Aerys began to wonder if his own hand was against him. The thought of Owen being a traitor led to the Mad King stripping him of all his titles and exiling him out of the Seven Kingdoms for absolutely nothing. This began a new trend at court. The Mad King began to wonder where his son Rhaegar was hiding, so sent out the Lord Commander of his Kingsguard, Gerald Hightower, to seek him out. The White Bull was successfully able to find Rhaegar and Dorne, but never returned to court to lead the war against Robert. Gerald stayed back with 2 other members of the Kingsguard to watch over Lyanna and Dorne. Aerys needed a new hand before he could go worrying about other traitors on the small council like Gerald. Old man Merryweather was too slow and wrinkly to deal with Robert's strength, so Aerys had the great idea to appoint the closest next best thing to match him, a young strong lord from the Stormlands just like Robert, Lord John Cunnington. But like Owen, he also sucked, so he was sent packing, exiling him out of the Seven Kingdoms. The 4th hand in this reign was Carlton Shelsted, so I guess he served as both hand and master of coin during the rebellion. Aerys Targaryen should have been responsible in controlling the royal fleet, but there's no mention of what exactly he was doing. All we know is that a storm completely wiped out the crown's fleet. Things were looking bad for Aerys, and his small council was crumbling. The royals desperately needed Tywin and the Westerlands on his side, especially now that Robert was successful in killing Rhaegar in single combat. But Tywin remained neutral. The rebels were marching to King's Landing. Aerys' madness reached new heights from the stress of the war. His plan to deal with all of his enemies on his own turf was blowing up all of King's Landing with wildfire, with the help of good old trusty Rosar. His hand Carlton finally grew some balls and spoke against this idiotic plan. Jaime Lannister mentions this was the only display of courage Carlton ever showed. The Mad King burned him alive with wildfire for speaking out against him. The Mad King's 5th and final hand became Wisdom Rosar, the nutty pyromancer mad enough to actually try and carry out this plot to blow up King's Landing. And just then, Tywin with an army appeared. Varys, for some reason, remained loyal to the Mad King throughout all of this, advising the king that Tywin should not be allowed in the city's walls. He couldn't be trusted. But Grand Maester Pycelle, who had been around long before Varys, advised the king to let Tywin and his men in. Aerys decided to listen to Pycelle, the schemer, who had a Tywin bias. The Westerlanders sacked King's Landing, and Jaime killed the Mad King to stop all the explosions. Then hunted out Rosar and killed him too. Tywin was the only hand that served the Mad King longer than 1 year. Gerald Hightower was eventually confronted by Ned Stark looking for his sister and killed. I assume Aerys Targaryen died in that storm. That leaves Pycelle, Varys, and Lord Simon Staunton as the 3 only members of the small council that survived Robert's rebellion. We know that the new king treated Pycelle and Varys kindly, but nothing is written about Simon, the Master of Laws. His fate is unknown. Being so openly pro-Aerys probably didn't help his case when a new small council had to be constructed. Guess what video is up next? Thanks for watching this one, guys. The next one will be up soon.